Of course, I don't want to put wildfires in one compartment. That is something I've studied the most. But yes, this also is parallel to the impacts that one sees with other disasters like floods or hurricanes. Um, Actually, the impacts are complex. We see symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. We see cognitive impacts, especially the ability to pay attention is very much impacted, largely because we're not able to suppress distracting information. So, an individual who's impacted by a disaster such as this may feel highly distracted, and that's part of the survival instinct of the brain, where our brains are constantly scanning for threat when they have gone through a threatening experience, and therefore anything in the environment could be a relevant signal that is signaling threat in some way. And so individuals feel that everything is around them is important, and our brain sort of makes us feel that everything could be a threat, therefore it should be salient, therefore the brains are tired and distracted and aren't able to make decisions properly. Now, this sort of complex set of symptoms, we need to understand this better, also develop treatments for it. And also, what I want to note is that this kind of trauma is not like one individual's PTSD. This is community-wide trauma that happens. People who are directly impacted, that is, people who've lost their homes or have family members who are part of the disaster, those people are most impacted. The symptoms are the severest. But what we also find is that people who are indirectly impacted, those who have witnessed such a disaster in their community, but have not personally suffered, those individuals will also show these symptoms. So what happens is that the prevalence numbers are that almost 40% of the community can show signs of trauma. And what I want to end with, because you asked me two questions in one and became a long answer, is that climate trauma is collective trauma. It's community-wide trauma. Thinking that almost every other person in the community where this disaster has happened has this trauma to some extent. And for collective trauma, we need collective healing, which means coming out and supporting each other and in the recovery efforts and so on. So it's not just one person's PTSD, and therefore it needs its own characterization.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Delgado Podcast. As always, you can get the show notes, video links, and resources mentioned in this episode on my blog at mikedelgado.org. You can also get updates to new shows and get access to the full archive of past shows by following the Delgado Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you ever have suggestions for future topics or guests you want to hear from on this show, please reach out. My email is delgado@ucla.edu. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll chat more next time.